It's pretty easy to make a little monster in Blender, and in this guide I'm going to show you how to create the rough shape, show you the different tools that you can use to create the details, and then finally I'm going to show you how to colour and create the final image that you can share on your socials. If you get stuck at any time, later in this video I'm going to explain what you can do. So if you come across to your edit menu preferences, and then come to add-ons, I use this Machine Tools. It's a free add-on that you can find online. Just Google it. It's on GitHub. You can buy it from blendermarket.com, but it's like $1. You do you. This is how I like the user interface. And if say you do get this tool, then these are just the options that I choose. So I'm not really using a lot. It's just a couple of things that I quite like. So if you want to copy that, then great. And the other one that I use is you can just type in VDM into the search box, and then we can find baking VDM brush baker. So if you just enable that, then that's something that we are going to use. Right, so to begin with, let's just get rid of this default cube. We don't need the default cube. And then we can Shift A, add in, and let's make a UV sphere. So this is going to be the base of our object. And what I want to do is just maybe grab this on the Z axis. So that's GZ, move it to just above there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a cylinder, and I'm just going to scale that down and just move it around to just about there, and then utilize the mirror modifier to just mirror it across there. And now hovering over the mirror modifier, press Ctrl A to apply that. So what we want to do with these cylinders is press Ctrl 2 and it'll add a subdivision surface modifier there. If we come across into edit mode by pressing tab, it'll bring up this radial menu, and this is if you have the machine tools enabled. Otherwise just press Ctrl tab and it'll give you a different radial menu. I'm just going to use my shortcuts for now. Just remember, if you see this radial menu, then you just have to press Ctrl tab instead, but for me this is the menu. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come across into edit mode, and I'm going to press Ctrl R to add a loop cut, and I'm just going to bring that down to the, well, I'm just going to leave that in the middle, add another one there, select both of them, double G to grab, and just move those right down like that, and then I'm just going to isolate that with /3 to go into face select, 1 to go into forward view, / to come out of isolation mode, and then grab Z, put those just inside the body like that, just to hide it out of the way. Now what we can do is we can Ctrl A on the subdivision surface modifier, and that'll apply the geometry. I'm going to press Ctrl 2 on the sphere, same process, apply the geometry, and then what we're going to do is click on the legs, then the body, Ctrl J to join those together, and then we can come into sculpt mode now. So what we can do is we can come to straight away remesh. We can see the level of detail that we already have on the model just by clicking on the eyedropper, and then we click somewhere on the mesh and then come back to remesh, and this shows us what level of detail we've got. So ideally we want to keep this no greater than this, so if we maybe put that to 0.02, hit remesh, and this will merge all these together. You see how there's like a seam there now. So what we can do is we can come to the mirror option here and click on X, and then anything we do on one side will work on the other. So with any brush selected, you can just hold shift and then just smooth that seam just like that, just using the middle mouse button to rotate around the object, and then shift and click to smooth that out. Okay, so with this draw brush selected, I'm just going to press Control. I'm just going to make tiny little eye holes here. Just keep releasing the mouse to dig a little deeper, just like that. So we're just going to make these little eye sockets, and then we're going to do the same kind of thing for the mouth. In fact, what we can do is just press M to do mask, and then where the strength is, just bring that right up to 1, and now we can actually just draw the mouth on, just like this. And then we press A, invert mask, and now we've come back to the draw tool, use the F key to increase the size, and then Control again, just draw in this little hole, and it'll only affect the faces that are unmasked. And then press A, clear mask. So when we're sculpting like this, all we're doing is we're pushing the geometry to different locations. We're not adding any extra geometry. So there'll be times where we need to actually increase the amount of geometry. So let me show you with the snake hook tool. This is probably the best thing that we can use. So just going to turn off symmetry for 1 second. So if I grab this and move it all the way out, you can see there how it's kind of getting all weird. And that's because there's not enough geometry, and Blender's just basically pulling a few vertices in a long distance. So we can see here how it's really dense here and kind of gets less and less dense the further out we go. So we've got only a few vertices there. So let me just undo all this. So what we want to do is we want to add the geometry. So we can start off by, say, pulling this out like this, and then we can press Ctrl R to remesh it. When we look at the vertices, we can see there it's like added that geometry over the top of what it was before. So we don't actually want a stick there. I just wanted to illustrate that point to you. So once we've dug out the eye holes, we can see in edit mode that these faces are kind of big, but then we come into sculpt mode and press Ctrl R to remesh, and now when we go back into edit mode, we can see that there's a lot more geometry there. So generally speaking, what you'll do is you'll make some changes and then you'll remesh it, and then you'll make more changes and you'll remesh it, and so on and so forth. So now we've got the very, very basics of our monster there. This is the absolute basic shape. What we want to do is we press N to open our properties panel, and then come to the tool menu. We're going to do a create sculpting plane, and that's going to just make this square at the world origin. Just grab it on the x-axis, just move it to the side, and what we're going to do is going to come into sculpt mode, press number 7 to go to the top view, and what we want to do is maybe do some clay strips and kind of go, let's just draw along here and along here maybe. I've done that a little bit big. I'm just going to make that a little bit smaller, so we don't want it to go too far to the edges. Just trying to make a very kind of rough, uneven sort of pattern. I don't really know what I want it to look like just yet. Okay, and so maybe I just want to like smooth this out a little bit, and then I'm going to get the crease brush, just make it a little bit smaller. I'm just going to run down these lines, kind of make them a bit jagged, and then maybe the scrape brush to add a bit of flat surfaces on here. Okay, so that's kind of in the direction I want, but it's not quite. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to experiment, build a few kind of blobs here and there. Don't worry about overlapping the lines or anything like that, just randomly all over the place. This is just kind of giving us a base texture, and then we can go back to the scrape tool, maybe a little bit bigger. I just want to kind of scrape the top off these. I think that's working. It's doing something for sure, and it's just making a really interesting texture. Maybe do a few more little bits and bats here and there. Use the scrape brush again. Right, so I think that's looking kind of fun. Just one more just to fill it in a little bit more, I think. If we wanted to, what we can do is we can just do a simple subdivision of the mesh just to make it a little bit more detailed, and then we can a few grooves onto this, just a bit of texture. I mean, it depends on how in depth you want to go with this. I've got absolutely no idea how this is going to turn out like this, but we'll see. Probably would be easier with my drawing tablet to do this, but we're doing it with the mouse. Okay, so I think from a distance that'll look fine, and we don't need to worry too much because we're not going to be zooming in super far with this. So what we can do is we can come out of sculpt mode now and come across to the VDM section again, and we'll just call that, press enter, and it'll show you if that's already being used. Now at this stage you want to be clicking this, but first of all we need to save. So make sure you press Ctrl S and create a file, and then what will happen now is once you've saved your file, when you do render, it will pop all the necessary files it needs into a folder relative to this blend directory. So we don't actually need this anymore, so we just press M, new collection, or just hidden, move that out of the way to hidden connection, and then just untick this box here, this little square box, and that'll hide it from view. Now if we come back across to our monster base and then come across into sculpt mode again, then we can find our draw brush. And now if we look in the tools panel, so N to bring up the properties, if you don't have it open, just click on this brush here, and we can see there now we've got a new skin brush. And so let's just increase the size and watch what happens. So it starts to draw that brush on the mesh. Now I kind of want this detail to be quite small, and as we can see there that it's not showing anywhere near any of the detail that we had before. So let's just Ctrl Z to undo that. we're going to come across to the remesh, and we're actually going to change this size to 0.01 and press Ctrl S, because always save before you remesh, as sometimes Blender can crash when it's doing intensive calculations. So as you can see, I'm kind of frozen right now while it's remeshing that. This is something that could cause a crash, so always save before you remesh. Ctrl S, Ctrl R, and there we go. That's all remeshed. So now when we actually start to draw, we can see the detail is much more obvious. Okay, so what I want to do to begin with is I want to press M to go into mask, and I want to mask out this whole face area. So the face and the mouth, nice and masked out. So this basically means that I'm not going to draw anything on this area. Press M again to turn off the mask brush, and then we can start doing these VDM bits here like this. And what we can do is, if we wanted, we can make like a big section here as an example and draw on top of it to add a little bit more texture. So that's basically what we're going to be doing. Need to remember to turn on the X symmetry to begin with. Let's take our brush, make it rather large. Let's just draw a really big kind of area of the model. And this is just going to give us like a base sort of texture to work on. Okay, so my computer's going a little bit more sluggish than I'd like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into the remesh option, and I'm just going to change that to a 5 and then remesh that. And it shouldn't have too much of an effect on it. Okay, yeah, so that's much smoother now. You lose a little bit of detail, but it's just about finding that happy medium. So now we've got this kind of base texture in place, then we can just sort of start smaller details just all around. Not too happy with those middle ones. So I think what I'll do is I'll avoid the middle section, and then I'll disable the X mirror a bit later on. And this is really cool because you can just put so much detail so quickly. Like, that looks really cool. And I'm just going to disable this X-axis just to put in detail along the middle, and a little bit of asymmetry never killed anyone. And there we go. So what we can do now is, let's just show, for example, create another sculpting plane. Just move that to the side, and we can make other stuff. Let's take the clay script, the clay strips. Take the clay strips brush, and I like this one just because it adds a lot of texture to the brush compared to, say, the draw brush. Back to this one, it's very smooth, and you know that can work if that's what you're going for. But this particular look, I'm using the clay strips brush just because I want that sort of very harsh textured look. And so I'm going to use this brush on top of it. I'm just going to draw a little thing there, and then use the scrape brush, sort of defined lines in there to increase the strength a little bit. Like, I don't really know what this is. Maybe like a gem or something. We can see that it's kind of like a gem or a crystal or something. And then just use the crease brush to sculpt around there. I think maybe we need a little bit more resolution on that one, so we can get those finer details in. And what's kind of fun as well, if you wanted to, and I'm not saying this is what I want to do specifically, but to just grab a few little details, you can use existing brushes to actually add more texture to new brushes, and this can help you build up more and more detail on brushes. Like, I don't think this is really working in this particular. I mean, that looks kind of cool, but it's not what I want to go for. So okay, so what we'll do is we'll just go for, I don't know what to call this one, gem. Let's call it gem. Render and create VDM, and there we go, that's that one done. And now we can press M to move that to hidden, come back across to our little creature, and we can select the gem, just basically put in a few little nubblies here and there. And the existing shape is actually changing the shape of this one, so all of these gems are actually going to be unique, and that's really helpful. And it's going to be so easy to actually colour these in, which I'm going to show you soon, how to differentiate the different things within the object. Okay, like one last gem just there, I think. So that looks really cool. So this face is a little bit basic. We could do to have like a texture here. If we press A, invert mask, this allows us to draw on this. Just going to Control S and Control R just to remesh everything. And then I'm just going to smooth things out just in the eye sockets. So I kind of like this happiness that we're already seeing here. I'm just going to try and add a little bit more detail without destroying the look of this thing. Maybe what we can do is we can create another sculpting plane and make some kind of texture, call it a face, come across to the box mask, and we can just draw like this on the edges, just like this. And what this means is that we can't move those edges, so we want to be aiming to stay inside this box anyway, but this just guarantees that it's not going to move. And let's just quickly make that again. And I think what I'm just going to do straight away, subdivide it a couple more times. I'm actually going to use the crease brush, and I'm just going to draw. I'm not going to use any of the textures. Make it a really small brush. Okay, so we'll try this texture. I don't know how this is going to look, but we will soon find out. So we'll overwrite that VDM brush, and we're going to move this to the hidden collection. Okay, that's not too terrible actually. So if we do lots of little patches of this, there we go. That looks actually better than I expected it was going to. Okay, so remember to save. Now let's maybe, I'm undecided whether we want eyeballs in this, so we're going to try and see what eyeballs looks like. I think it looks kind of cute like this, but let's shift and right click to move our 3D cursor, shift A, and we're going to do a UV sphere, and straight away we come into edit mode, and then R to rotate, X and 90. This is just to bring this point here to the front, because this is really useful for making like pupils. If like you want to have a pupil, you don't have to, but we're going to right click, shade smooth, and then just scale it right down, and then we're going to add a modifier, generate mirror. We're going to mirror it across this object, and then shift click Control P to parent object. So it's just if we move it, it'll stick with it. So yeah, let's look at actually coloring this thing in now. So I think it would be worth coming across to the shading tab up here, changing this to rendered mode, and then we're going to turn off the scene lights, and we're going to turn off the scene world, and it'll give us a very generic HDRI. And one thing that I do, I have my viewport set to 2 samples, and the denoise to optics, and increases to like maybe 10 just for a little bit more detail, just depending on your preference, but just for general kind of speediness I leave it on 2. Right, so what color do we want it to begin with? So let's make a new material, and what we want to do is come across to the object data panel here, and we're going to do color attribute, new color, and we're just going to call this base, and let's just change this to something like a gray color and press OK. And then we can shift add input attributes, no, color attribute, drop that down there, base, take this color and plug it straight into there, and then that colors it gray. And then let's just click on, we'll come back to this one in a second, but let's just click on the eyes, new material, base color. I'm just going to change those to black, and let's change the roughness to 0, so they're like little black marbles. Now what we can do is, in fact, let's just jump back over to the layout for a little bit. Click on this to change it to the solid view, come back into the sculpt mode, and if we scroll down your toolbar here, you'll find a paintbrush, and it's this one here. So it's none of these, this one just here. And what we can do is maybe change the color to something a little bit lighter like this, and we can around here just like this, and it's not going to go over your mask, it's just going to go up to the edges of where your masks are, because we haven't deselected the mask yet. If you did deselect your mask, then M for mask, draw it again. And now what we can also do is we can just press shift click, and it'll smooth it all out. And now what we can do is we can come back into the shading tab, we can shift A, add in a converter color ramp, plonk that in there, and then what this will now let us do is we can change to different colors. So let's like that, and then we can change this to like a red. And so think of the black and white as like a mask, and it's going between black, which is at this end, and white, which is at this end. Because we didn't paint this black to begin with, we painted it kind of a grey. That's why it's kind of like a pink. So it's like here on the colours. So if we wanted to like make that more red, we could just move that up like this. I kind of like that shade of pink. And then we can also take this one and we can increase the saturation a little bit, and it'll move it towards the red, but not a lot. It's not pure white, which is kind of cool. And again, we didn't paint this pure white, so it'll never be pure white. This will be somewhere in the middle here. If we wanted to increase the whiteness of it, then we just shift this. But I kind of like this kind of desaturated look, which is kind of cool. Remember to save. So I'm going to go back to the layout again into the sculpting mode. We're going to actually do another little bit of detail. But what we're going to do is come to the data tab. The color attribute is going to add a new one. We're just going to call this gems, and I want to make this completely black. And don't worry that it's overwritten the colors previously. That's fine. It's, you know, there's this one and this one. It's just two different color maps. And what I want to do is I want to take the color, increase that to white. We actually need to remove the mask. So let's clear the mask by pressing A, clear mask. And then we can just draw on these gems just like this. Now I find that you don't need to be excessively precise with this. Just try not to go over the edges. It doesn't matter if you're not quite at the edges, it's fine. And I find that if you go like sort of straight on, you get a good kind of fall off. Right, so once you've got all your objects painted, once you've got all your gems painted, we can now come back into the shading tab. It's not having any effect on it right now, which is absolutely fine. What we need to do is we're actually going to create another shader. So let's press Shift A, and I think let's do a principled BSDF again, and then we'll come to emission, and let's just plug this into the material output for a minute just so we can see what it looks like. And let's think what colors we want. So maybe we want it glowing like sort of color perhaps. Actually, let's make it like a blue sort of color. And then I'm going to set the strength. We'll start off with 1 on this. So this is glowing, the whole thing's glowing. But what we want is to have it only glowing where we put the gems. So let's just take this color attribute and Shift D to duplicate it and change that from base to gems. And then Shift A, we're going to add mix shader. Pop that into there just like this. This one into here. We can see there that if this is set to 1, it's pink, and if this is set to 0, it's glowing. So what we actually want to do is want to change these over so that 1 is glowing and 0 is pink. And then if we take the color from the gems attribute and plug it into the FAC, we'll see there that the gems are glowing where they need to be glowing. And so now you can tweak the colors on your gems till it looks nice. We can turn to glass if we wish. You see how it's catching the lights, reflecting them. Now you might think, oh, actually I don't like that just like that, which is fine. We can just go back into sculpt mode, and then we can find the paintbrush tool and just press Shift and just paint over, and it'll blur it just very, very subtly. Or if you wanted to add more over, and then Shift to blur around the edges so it transitions nicely. Okay, so I'm not 100% sure about that blue. I need to assess it in a better lighting condition. So I'm just going to press Shift C to recenter the case to the world origin. I also want to make this thing a whole lot smaller because it's absolutely humongous right now. And if we look in the item, we can see that it's actually over 2.5 meters tall. And I don't like my creatures being that tall. And you know, you might think, well, why does it matter? But it affects the depth of field, and when you render it. So I want to bring it to about 0.5 meter tall. I think that's more appropriate, and then apply scale there, a scale of 1, and let's Shift A to add in a plane, and we're going to edit this, grab this back face. So number 2 grabs back face, EZ 2, and I'll extrude it up. And I'm just going to click on this edge here, Control B to bevel, and then use my mouse scroll to just add a few cuts in there just to make it a smooth transition. And then let's come back to the layout for a minute, press 1, shade that smooth. And so what we can do is, while we're looking in this front perspective here, we can go to view and then align view, align active camera to view, and then that will put the camera in this front position. It makes it a little bit easier to get into the right place. Adjust the position of that to 0. It needs to be much further back, 2.5. Axis a little. Okay, so that's roughly where we want it to be. So we can scale this up by, say, 2, for example. Now we can start previewing the scene lights and the scene world. Because we've got emission here, it might actually be really useful to decrease the environment. And these lights might be a little bit too bright. So this is the illumination. I think what I might actually, I'm going to add in an environment texture. Open. You're going to need to download some HDRIs. So what I'd doing is go to a place called Polyhaven. So just Google Polyhaven, Polyhaven. Google that, and then you can download HDRIs for free. It's an amazing resource site. Highly recommend it. Get some HDRIs into a folder and have a variety of them. So what I've done is I've picked a night scene here. Do you know what? I'm not happy with this illumination. This is the problem. I'm trying to make something happen that isn't working for me. So I'm going to come back into the shading, and I'm going to get rid of that emission. I don't want that to be an emission. So I think what I want to actually do is make it like glass. I think that might look a lot better. Yeah, look at that. So it's kind of, it's refracting environment. I think we need to increase the roughness a little bit though to make them, that's much better. Do we think? I think that's better. So now if we turn on the scene lights in the scene world, just crank up the lights again. And I think now that we've changed the thing, we can change the environment a little bit as well. I think that's nice. There we go. That's what we're looking for. Now I think I don't want this I don't want this aspect resolution. I can't speak. I don't want this aspect ratio for the camera, so we can change that in here. Just say 1080 by 1080, and then you can either move the camera forward or you can increase the focal length. It has two different effects. I prefer to increase the focal length because I think you get a nicer image there. So if we have it like this, that's sort of 150 compared to moving the camera, which you can just do in the view, camera to view, and then you control and middle mouse button. You see how the image changes in distortion. So we can see here that the eyes are kind of further apart at this perspective, whereas if we increase this to 150, you can see how they're kind of close together. It's just due to the curvature of the lens. I'll leave it like that. So I think maybe a little bit further back. What we can do is just like grab this, press Shift and Z just to sort of like move it just a little bit to the edge, and then rotate on the Z axis and making sure that it's on the median point. Rotate Z, and we have it like this perhaps. And then what we can do is with this selected, we can right click, select hierarchy, and we can Shift D and then Shift Z. Ooh, that's really sensitive. Let's just right click and drop that where it needs to be. We can change this back to the 3D cursor. We can rotate Z just like this, and then we can scale, Shift Z, and we'll just hold Shift this time just to smooth out make it a little bit less sensitive when we're moving it. And let's do Shift D again, Shift Z, and hold Shift. Scale this down, grab Shift Z, need to rotate that on its median point, rotate Z, and then Control S, and then just some fine adjustments to the camera. I'm just going to grab that on it to just move it across just a. In fact, that's a nice little transition because we've got a little bit of parallax going on there. So what we can do is we can actually, let's put the camera here, and let's just change this to timeline by pressing Shift F12 a couple of times, and then because we've got the camera selected here, we can press I, location, and then what sort of time would be a good pan time. So maybe like, so we're doing it 24 frames per second, maybe do that over 4 seconds, so that's 96. So set the length to 96, so move that to the end. Camera's still selected, we're going to grab that on the X-axis. Let's just move it across here. I'm going to press I, location again, and then what we're going to do is we're going to change this to linear interpolation, because right now, let me just change this to this for speed. So you see how it slows down, speeds up, and then slows down again. If we change this by pressing hover over, press T, linear interpolation, and then we can, when we play it, it's smooth, it's constant. There's no slowing up and speeding down. And I really like that parallax effect there. It's really nice. It's because this is like really far away, and it's more noticeable. You kind of like don't really know how far. I mean, that probably means that's really tiny actually. Let's just move this one back. Should probably be there. Little baby one. What we can do as well is with the camera, we can add a depth of field to it. Click on the object. You can see here how this in the foreground is out of focus. Maybe this needs to be a little bit bigger. I'm just being lazy by using the 3D cursor of this, because this is actually going to move the origin a bit bigger that way. Grab it, Shift Z. So when it comes to the depth of field, like I really do love depth of field, but sometimes it can be extreme. So you want to change the f-stop to maybe like 5.6 for example. You can see how more of that comes into focus, or 0.0. So you'll still see a little bit of blur, but it really highlights the kind of the size and the scale of the scene when you have a little bit of depth of field, and it's really nice. So let's take a render and see what we're looking like. So yeah, I think that looks really nice. Nice little cute family of monster things, which I think is awesome. So if you've followed along this far but you've got stuck on something and you need a little bit of help troubleshooting, by all means ask in the comments and the community can help. I'll try and help if possible. Very limited to what we can do in the comments. So if anyone wants to become a member of the channel, it'll give you access to a priority troubleshooting section of my Discord. So welcome to join there. Just make sure you pay attention to which tier you're subscribing to, because currently I have 2 tiers. One is just a kind of a thank you kind of tier, where it's just like, hey, thanks for the tutorial, go get a Snickers. The other one is a little bit more expensive, but it does provide you with that extra level of support that I can give you. Hopefully if you enjoyed, hit the like button, hit that subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.